Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, and we have our resident insurance expert that is joining us this evening, Mr. Tommy Ruke. Would like for you to big favor. We apologize for running a little bit late, but we had a little technical difficulty we had to work through, but no big thing. We are here live and in living color. If you would do us one big favor, would you please like, share, and subscribe to the channel? That helps us get these videos out to a broader audience. Maybe you might know someone that this may help them out along on their route. So if you don't mind, please pass it along, share, and subscribe. That really helps us out with getting these videos out to a broader audience. With that being said, I'm going to welcome my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
Rico, we're great. You know what? I just got back from Matt's. I worked the traffic booth over at Matt's, and I got to say, it was the busiest I've ever seen it. Usually Saturday at Matt's especially is not a great day. You get a lot of the public in, but I could not believe how many truckers we had there. It was incredible. Great turnout, well-run show. It was a great experience. Got to see a lot of our listeners, got to see a lot of old friends, business associates. It was just a wonderful experience.
I saw got a chance to see a couple of the pictures there. I guess we'll talk about those. Talk about the experience from Matt a little bit later on in the show, but I don't want to keep our guests waiting. We affectionately call Mr. Tommy Ruke our resident resident insurance expert. He comes on and he helps us out, kind of really demystify a lot of the things that are going on within the insurance industry, and helps try to keep us on the right, straight and narrow path when it comes to making sure our insurance and all that stuff is in order. So with that being said, I want to welcome Tommy Ruke to the Rates and Lanes podcast. Good evening, Tommy. How are you?
Rico, I'm good. Chuck, I'm good. Just know, Rico, I was in Orlando last Monday night with the guy who's hosting here, and he bought me dinner. So I like that idea. So we were able to meet about once a year on his way to Mac.
That's not a bad deal.
It's not a bad deal. It's good seafood, though, too, wasn't it, Chuck?
Yeah. We had a great time.
Orlando and I preached the gospel last week.
When you get to Atlanta, though, Rico has this great steakhouse he took me to, and my cousin and I are still raving about it. That was a couple of years ago. It was fantastic. So
which one is it,
when
Rico?
you get to Atlanta, get Rico to take you to that steakhouse. It's epic.
So my college roommate lives in Buckhead.
Okay.
I come and visit Buckhead Plaza there. He's right north of there up on the redevelopment. He's lived there a number of years. In fact, he worked for the city when they mapped out MARTA. He helped buy the stations and stuff. He was working in the real estate department. Anyway, so I get to Atlanta every now and then.
Good deal. Well, from what I hear, there's some important stuff coming down the pike that we need to be aware of. Tommy, won't you bring us up to speed?
We got 2 or 3 things that are popping right now, and just the statistics that we deal with. The one thing that's really hitting the press is this new Florida Reform Act, where Florida has finally passed a law that will protect us. Florida has been the hellhole, excuse my language, of trucking insurance. Now you know who is now, Rico?
No.
Georgia.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Georgia is not a very favorable place in the world right now. So Florida passed the law, and by the way, to beat the law, there were 100,000 lawsuits filed last week in Florida.
Whoa.
Wow.
Because they all wanted to get the case in before the law was effective.
That'll tie up your courts for the next 100 years.
And all of the lawyers demand policy limits here for all the cases. Now, Morgan, I don't even like to give the name, filed 45,000 and wrote a blasting letter damning the insurance industry and saying this law is killing them. They mean the plaintiff's attorneys.
Oh,
wow.
That means they can't buy any more sailboats?
It is. The bottom line is, and just Florida says there's, and Texas has similar part of the law,
Right.
that before you introduce all the things that have aggregated the reptile theory, all the CSA scores and all that, you have to show that the motor carrier was negligent or the driver was negligent. And then you can introduce the rest of it. Because what's happening is they take the focus away from the crash to try to say the motor carrier was unsafe and bad, and you need to put them out of business. This is a whole reptile theory. So Florida did many major things, but first off, you cannot go there unless there's negligent. Second, they now have come to a modified comparative state. There's various things. Basically, comparative means that when the crash happens, each side will be allocated a certain degree of negligence. And so, like, if I'm a truck driver and 20% negligent, the other part is 80% negligent. If their damage is $1 million, I still owe 20% of the million, $200,000, that percentage. Now, what Florida's come up with, if you're 50% or more negligent, you cannot claim anything. So statistics show the four-wheeler is negligent like 70% of the time.
Right.
So the point here is we've got to get cameras in these trucks, because this is how to protect the people. Anybody listen to me? I understand privacy. I understand this. Put something over it when you park. But when you're running down the highway in that engine zone, you want both front and rear view, because this is the only way we're going to prove that we were not negligent at all and the party other. This is what's going to end up saving us. It's the golden rod in the future here. They just got to think about this protection.
When you're saying rear view, are you talking about forward
driver view? Driver view.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
And I just saw now there's a wireless camera on the rear view where you can put on the back of your trailer that shows the same thing as your car do. I just saw an advertisement for one of those. Pretty reasonable price too.
Tommy, let me ask you something. How long do you? I totally agree with you, because I understand how insurance companies work, and as somebody that bought truck insurance for well over 40 years, I understand it. Want to keep rates low, always wanted to keep our rates low. But how long until you figure the insurance companies are just going to say, you want insurance, you better put a forward and outside facing cameras?
Chuck, every insurance company has their own appetite for things. Some companies charge more than others, so they have more risk tolerant. And insurance 101 is you get 100 people who are willing to share the losses of the other 100. One person to share the losses. So if you stay within your niche, and so what's happening, and I just read an article, Metrodyne has partnered with HIDV and CoverWell to install their driver monitoring and training program into their insurance program, and that's now going to be demanded, and they'll get a favorable rate. What is going to separate is how much you're willing to pay. And that chasm, as I told you before, is getting greater. If you don't have the cameras, don't have this training, don't have the warning for the drivers, then you're not going to get a favorable insurance. It's going to be divided up. So this is how the pressure is going to be. And when you say it's mandated, yeah, if you want in our preferred program, you got to do that. That's where it's going to be.
You know what? It makes a lot of sense. And I know that, having talked to hundreds of drivers at MATS, I know that a lot of the old timers, they don't even want, they don't even want outside cameras. They don't want any part of it. And I'm going, guys, you know what? You want to stay doing this? It's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah, it is. It's really a concern that we have in that. So that's number one part of it. The other thing is FMCSA has published a revision of the CSA scores. You can put input anytime between now and May 16th. The history is in 2015, Congress and the FAST Act in 2015 mandated CSA to come up with the FMCSA to study CSA. And they went to the National Academy of Science to develop a program modeled after SAT scores, these kind of things. And they came up with something called the item response theory, which meant that if you, how many different things you do wrong, then your score gets worse. I mean, we're trying to measure a culture of safety. The FMCSA, after 6 years, decided it was too confusing. And kind of ironic about it, it was too confusing for truckers to understand. I don't know if they dummied it down, but I mean, this is the comment. So they came up with a modified one that's going to roll out, and it's all of our opinion it's going to happen, just because they're too far down the line for it not to happen. And there's not a lot of different things here, but I've done some study on that. 3 or 4 major things that are going to be changed here. The first off, and this is one that's going to affect your drivers and their hiring. They divided maintenance up between maintenance by the motor carrier, and now there's a category for maintenance where if they get a violation and the driver could have found it at the DIVR, the driver vehicle walk around,
Right.
then that's going to be cited against the driver, which is going to be affecting their PSP.
But does it go against the company? Like if your driver doesn't catch, let's just say, I'm going to say a bad airbag, okay? Does that still go against the company or not at all?
Not airbag, cracked frames, and all that does not. It's things the driver could have or should have seen if they did the walk around. It's what you can see on a walk around inspection: lights, tires, air horn, air leaks, those kind of things. And it's going against the driver now, not the motor carrier. Now, the motor carrier can still be cited for cracked frames, loose U-bolts, and springs,
Right.
air bags leaks, those kind of things that would take a full overtime. So the driver now has to do the DVIR, driver vehicle inspection report, everything. The FMCA did something that kind of sent missed messages. They say it wasn't mandatory anymore if there wasn't a violation. What they really meant is we're not going to go in and see if you're doing it to mandatory. But if there's a violation, then you have to still do it. And so now they've come up with a way to enforce that part of it. So that's going to be major. The second thing is the on-road drug violations is going to be charged against unsafe driving. Now, instead of drug and alcohol, that category just is going away. And you can go in and put your DOT number in and your PIN number and see what the new scores are. We just came with a study of those. FMCSA says that nobody's going to change more than 10%. Well, they're not telling the truth. There's some that's going to change greatly on this, but the good part about it is only about 10% are going to have 10 points higher, and about 10% are going to have 10 points less than what they have now with their CSA scores. So it's if you're on the outlier, you could be approaching an alert. You're still going to have an alert. But now the numbers, instead of going, and they level things off, where you've heard a debate, the states are different and the violations are different. In some states, when you get stopped, give you more violation than others. Rico, I don't know if you run into that or seen that, anybody complaining about that part of it. Sure. But what they've done is taken the 965 violations and went them down to 168 categories. For example, all the light categories, and there's like 17 or 18 of them, it's just going to be one category now, lights. And so for the CSA scores, there's still going to be violations broken out if what light, tail light, turn signal, those kind of lights, but from the scoring system, it's only going to be one. This will make it where states tend to cite more violations for penalty's sake than others. This will level that part of it off. They've also going to do an equalize point where if you are a small motor carrier and if you have an inspection, it kicks you into another safety event group. They've got some leveling force that won't affect you as bad as it does now, because where you're now compared with a bigger group. But this is going to be big time. The things that are important about this, it's going to look good. Instead of having the scores, now the scores are 1 to 10 violations. Right. The scores in the future is going to be 1. If you get an out of service, it's 2. That's it. It's not going to be any evaluation. Decide speeding 5 to 10 miles an hour is a 5, 10 to 15 is a 7, and over 15 is 10. And interstate highway, it's a 5. You're not going to get that. You're just going to get speeding, period. No matter where it is.
Yes, what happens in a case where a driver gets stopped and they find a multitude of things wrong? Do they hit him for every one, or is it only one?
Yes and no. They hit him for every one on the inspection. But when it rolls in the CSA scores, if it's all lights, it'll just show 1 point in the CSA scores. So the actual violations will still show, the penalties will still show, and they're having corrected will still show. But for CSA purposes, it'll just be 1 if it's all lights.
Okay. But if it's lights and tires or something
it'll be
else,
1 point for lights and 1 point for tires. But it won't make a difference if it's tires, wheels, drive axle, steering axle. 34 seconds on the steering axle, 32 seconds on the drive axle. Crack wheels. That'll all be under 1. And same thing with load security. We don't care if your tarps, chains, and binders. They don't care. Chains and binders, those kind of things will only show 1 thing: load security. So it's going to, the officers who try to get a pound of flesh aren't going, they can still get it, but going from the scores anymore, it will not, it won't affect you. And this gets back to the whole theory, trying to decide what's a culture of safety, meaning, it's not one thing you do, Chuck, it's everything you do. You got to pay attention to everything. So they're trying to measure it. The other thing is driver fitness is now, they're only going to look at 90. You have to have an over 90% higher score than any of your safety event groups. So they're only going to look at 10% of motor carriers with any violations in driver fitness, because they want to take care of the ones that are critical in driver fitness, which means now, from a audit standpoint and inspection standpoint, the driver fitness, if you mess up a lot of things for driver fitness, like the driver qualification file, these kind of things, they're not going to penalize you as much now for a little simple error. It's only when you have a lot of them. Okay. That's going to be a point. And this is going to roll out. For the first time, though, what has been the difference here is the things the insurance companies look at, which is what is this violations, how severe they are. That's still going to be available for the insurance company to underwrite by. The alerts you look at are going to be different. So we're going to have, from insurance, we're going to have to look at the alerts, but we're going to have to go in and look at the inspection reports themselves to see if the speeding's 5 over or 45 over, which we're concerned if it's 15 over, 60 to 45, we're concerned about that part of it. Not so much for 5 over 5 and 10 over 5, 15 miles. So it's going to really kind of divide things up. So we think, and again, I did a webinar today on this for the insurance industry. We think that now the underwriters are going to have to look at the individual violations versus just looking at the CSA scores and making a decision based on CSA scores.
Wow, this could change things, couldn't it?
Well, yeah, and we think it's for the better. It's the thing that they haven't done, Chuck, and this is friend that Craig Lack, who's carries software that somebody, and Steve Bryant, who used to have Samsung and now has Blue Wire. They still haven't come back, Chuck and Rico, and said anything has to do with a crash. They haven't related anything back to frequency of crashing, the crash increase because you have these violations, which is the whole purpose of this is do what? Avoid crashes here. So, So I don't know. I just think this is a compromise between the two complex things. The government mandated, and they spent, a year and a half to develop, studied for 6 years, and then threw it out. Just enough of that to get Congress, anybody off of their back, because again, 2015, there's been a lot of things happened since 2015 when this was mandated, part of it. So that act also mandated the study for electronic logs. The one thing, just to mention this, that the FAST Act said is that the scores would be not public anymore, but the scores have always been public and will always be public, because what happens is that the government sells this data to third-party providers. Screening companies like Carrier 411 and Insurance Carrier Software, Central Analysis Bureau, they sell that. And the formulas are public. So all you got to get is a programmer to take the violations and put them through the formula, and they come up with a score. So your truckers are getting scores. And the thing about this is that's going to determine if they get loads and if they get insurance. These scores still a key part. The insurance industry today looks at the CSA scores before they look at anything else on the application to see how they have operated on the highway.
So I've got a question for you, Tom. I understand why they could sell it and why it would be useful, and I also understand because we are motor carriers and we're serving the public needs to know what we're like as far as safety, because we're public carriers. But what happens in the case where you've got a private carrier hauling his or her own goods? Is it the same thing, like a milk producer or somebody like that, or a furniture maker that's not hauling for anybody else? Are his scores still public because he's totally a private carrier?
Again, Chuck, the scores are not public. You have to get them through a third-party provider. But because the third-party providers can produce a score on anybody with a DOT number, which would be private or for hire. Anybody with the DOT number. Which leads me to the point. The next thing that's proposing is to change the safety fitness determination. Right now, those are meaningless. The SFDs, the safety fitness determination, unrate, satisfactory, conditional, unsatisfactory.
Right.
It's been a move that people who are getting, there's people with MC numbers, over 90% have no score at all.
Right.
So of 445,000 motor carriers out there, only 90%, only 10% of those people have scores at all. And what they're pointing out is the new scores are coming out conditional, not satisfactory on the new inspections. That's because the only reason they're going in now looking at motor carriers if there's a problem. And so when they find a problem, they put conditional on it. Part of it. Now,
what happened? Can Rico order if Rico's never been audited and he's got a chance to get a big client, and the client says, "Well, we want you to go for an audit." Can he order an audit? Is there a way of doing it?
No, none of that part of it. And our friend Hank, and I was on a webinar at him today on his group here. He's got me hooked into trying to help out in the insurance part of his group, the part of it, and his stuff saying that what he wants to do is fit or unfit, meaning once you do your new venture interview, you're fit until you're proved unfit. And this is being proposed now to go to fit or unfit, period. No, that's all. Scores. And I think that's going to happen also just because of the total inefficiency. That bothers me in one way. If you're conditional, and by the way, about 11% of motor carriers satisfactory, only about 4 are conditional. So, about 89 and 90 are unrated. That's the numbers there. It's a very small amount that are satisfactory. Now you're conditional. If you correct that condition, you still can get insurance. But if you go to new score, fit and unfit, if you're unfit, you're out of business. You're not going to get insurance. You're not going to get a load. So I wish there was some kind of warning system, and I got to see how that's going to come down the pipe, where you give them a warning, or you know what I'm saying. We're going to warn you if you don't do this, you're going to be unfit. And so at least the motor carrier can aggressively address some of those kind of things. That reminds me of another thing. Tell any of our listeners that they need to go into the FMCA website look up the proposed rules, come to the CSA revisions, and go in there and make it and put their DOT number in and their PIN number, and see what their scores are now compared to what the new scores will be, and they can see where their pain is, where the problems is on the new scores, and they're still going to do 3, 2, 1, meaning that the scores that you get the first 6 months go in at 3 times the value. The second 6 to 12 months is only 2 times the value, and over 1 year, just 1 time the value. So if they go in now and find out what areas are causing them the most problem, which they should be able to look at, then they can actually correct it pretty quickly and address the 2 or 3 areas that might be a problem in this new scoring, and maybe do something about it before they have their insurance renewal, or before the loads catch those things, Chuck. It's very important, because there are going to be, some 10, 15% of them are going to have increased scores in most of the categories. And so they need to think about doing those things. The other thing they do, if you have no violations in a category in a year, then even if you had all of your previous violations get dropped off.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they're now just looking at a year. If you have a couple early in the year and nothing happens for 12 months, then you have no scores anymore.
Wow.
That's really fair.
Right. And I like that. They're paying attention.
Generally now,
excuse me, Rocco, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If I remember correctly, that it normally takes about 2 years for those things to drop off.
Yeah, there's a 2-year cycle. So now you could, if you have a problem and you stay clean for 12 months, then you can be clean.
Wow, that is wonderful.
Where before it was still there with a valuation of 1.
So Tommy, I got to ask you a question. What is going to happen to the carriers that have, and I realize it's a very small percentage, but it worked real hard years ago, and we got satisfactory ratings? Is that going to drop off and just become fit, or there's still going to be some with satisfactory?
No, they'll throw those out and be fit or non-fit. The whole system now, Chuck. But there's so few that are satisfactory. There's just no new ones. You're right. I look at some of them now, and you were satisfactory 10 years ago. That doesn't tell me what you're doing today. This gets back to the CSA scores, and there's going to be some kind of relationship. What's happening is the auditors come in and they have the CSA scores. That's one reason they're doing an audit. And so now they look at those things and they say, well, you've got a high CSA scores, or you've got an elevated. How can they give us satisfactory when they know they got roadside problems, which they don't supposed to consider when they're doing an in-house audit, because it's all paperwork. And so this is the mentality that's happening with the auditors, because now we're looking at the roadside activities as they come in to look at the audit itself. And so they have a reluctance to give someone satisfactory if they have some roadside problems. Where before that wasn't a consideration previous to CSA, obviously it wasn't at all.
So are they still, do you know whether or not this is still going to affect in the system when you go through, say, like if you go through for enforcement or anything like that? Are they still going to be kind of watching those numbers to increase your inspection frequency or not?
That's a good question, Rico. And the guy was on the webinar afterwards. I asked that question of each other, and I'll just tell you what they said. All right. When I listened to the listening session the FMCSA had, they had one at Med too, but this is one they did before that here. They said, unless something has changed, everything that we don't change is staying the same. So right now, the inspection selection system is based on the higher level. If you have an an alert for hours of service, or you have some critical violations, then you have a score over 75. So you 75 or above. So you inspect. If you have 2 alerts, then you're to inspect. If you have 1 alert, then you're optional. Since you're still giving alerts out, even though the scores are different, I think that's going to stay the same, Rico.
So you will get increased inspection.
If you have higher scores, yes. Yeah, I think that's the same part of it. They might tweak it a little bit, but since they refer to alerts and you're still going to get alerts, then I don't know why they would need to change it much.
Well, they're going. That makes sense. So they're going to still pull you in if they punch in your number and you're not real good. They know they've got a potential customer because they know they're going to find something because you're not a great operator.
There is one thing that you talk about that, Chuck, that I think, and again, I'm speculating how it's going to happen in the end. You follow me? Part of it here. But now there was a lot of discussion about I got a clean inspection, but the officer just lets me go. You've heard that, right? They didn't write it up. They take time.
Right.
Now they have to give everybody a 1 or a 0. So the audit has to show a 1 or a 0. And so now a clean audit will show all zeros, but it'll be noted on, inspection, but it'll be noted on the inspection because they got to put for all the categories a 1 or a 0.
So what you're saying is, regardless, if you get an inspection performed, if you get any kind of roadside inspection performed, they have to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down, one way or the other,
Right.
a 1 or a 0.
For everything they're inspected, they have to put a 1 or a 0. 1, there's a violation. 0, there's not.
I don't know if that works. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, the good thing about it, Rico, they've got to have a piece of documentation that you had no violations. That's the good part. Again, you got the categories are going to be greatly reduced, but yeah.
For some of these, and I think Rick Gobble kind of spoke to this a little bit the last time that we had him on, because the last, I don't know, you get officers that are doing an inspection and you may come out clean or whatever, or you may not have something, but if there's something that's kind of that probably they normally wouldn't say nothing to you about, I feel like they may mark it down because they don't want to have it come back on them on the backside.
Say that again. You mean they want to mark it down so if something happens later, they won't be liable for not marking it down? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Well, you see the categories, I just pulled this number. The categories are going from 973 to 116 because they're aggregating the ones that are similar. In other words, instead of having, now there's 5 speeding, there's only be 1. No matter what speeding violation you get, it's just going in as a 1. There are like 455 hazmat because the placard have to be
right.
So now if you got a hazmat violation, it's a 1. Where before they give you, if you have 4 placards out there, they could give you 4 violations for each placard.
Wow.
And each one of those would have a weighting here. You follow, and that would have the higher score.
I get what you're saying.
So that's the advantage. When I look at this, we did 450 people in this area, and just for vehicle maintenance for the fleet, 10% will be increased, but 45% will be decreased because now it's going against the driver. So the things that used to go against the motor carrier now goes against the driver. For unsafe driving, 7% will have an increase of over 10 points, and 2% will have a decrease of less than 10 points. And part of that is now the drug testing is going to be unsafe driving. So that's
so are they taking it away from no longer you normally used to be the driver and the company both would get dinged. So are you saying that now it's strictly going to be
there's two maintenance category, one for driver, which means things they should have seen at the DVIR, and one for other, which is the fleet. Yes, there's going to be 2 maintenance categories.
Okay.
And there's no longer substance abuse and alcohol. There's not going to be a category at all for that anymore on roadside inspection. It's all going against unsafe driving.
which would go on the driver.
Go on the driver.
And so that could be a potential for people that are company drivers. That could be a potential to be able to prevent them from being able to get a job in the future if they have higher scores.
Well, it's going into PSP, as
Or
you know. Everything
makes them uninsurable for.
Well, it's going to be the PS. Well, the PSP is unemployable. That just has to do with employment. It does not have to do with insurance companies can't say PSP. Pre-employment screening can only be seen by the person who makes the decision to hire somebody or not.
Right, but at the end of the day, I hear what you're saying. So, but I'm gonna for us laymen here, we may want to hire somebody, but if the insurance company say you can't hire that driver,
well, that's not based on PSPs. That's based on the MVRs mainly, and how long they've been there.
Okay. All right.
So that's the category there. The projections we say is about 10% of the motor carriers will have elevated score, maybe.
Is that all 10%?
Part, Chuck?
It's just 10% will have the elevated scores, you figure?
Well, over what they have now.
Okay.
In other words, it's going to affect them adversely than they have now.
Got it.
So,
yeah. Just changing gears just a little bit, Tommy. So here lately, and I'm not sure if this kind of connects with anything on the insurance side, but I've been seeing here lately that a lot of the ELD carriers or the ELD manufacturers, I should say, have been getting disqualified.
Yeah, about one last week.
Yeah. So how does that affect how does that affect a motor carrier with their insurance? Do you have any insight on that if they happen to have one of those different systems that they were using?
None at all, because the cure is you can be electronic logs for 8 days. After that, you have to have a new ELD.
So you have to equip all the trucks with new equipment.
With new equipment.
Yeah.
Right.
Which costs you because your existing equipment is out of date, it's out of service.
Well, yeah, and so they still have the hours of service, so that's not going.
Right. So Tom, I want to bring something up on the show here. I did speak to Tommy about it the other day, and I want Tommy to fill our listeners in. And I'm going to try not to be too graphic with this, but it happened to a friend of mine years ago, and it just came up at Matt's the other day. And if you have a driver that is I'm going to try to be as least amount of graphic, as I can. But if you have a driver that passes away in his or her truck, and they don't get them out within about, I think it's about 36 to 48 hours maximum, the body does what it does, and there's all sorts of gases and and liquids and solids, and it's a mess. The cab is considered. Where did Tommy go? Did we lose him, or is he down there?
I'm not sure if he
may press something.
If his power went out or something.
Yeah, he's down in Florida. Well, this is interesting, Rico, and I hope Tommy comes back on. Actually, we should just break on insurance till Tommy logs back on about Matt's. It was incredible this year compared to last year even. And I think that had to do with the amount of time people have now. They're not as busy. Last year, people couldn't come to the show because they were too busy working.
Yeah, still a lot of stuff going on, with pandemic and stuff like that. So while we got a minute, tell us a little bit about your experience at Matt's this year. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to make it up there to the convention this year.
Well, it was, the show overall is, it's very well run, other than, and I said it to Chris Blair, who runs it. They have which is really hard for the exhibitors and for the attendees. They have a VIP period of time from I think 10 to 1 on the first day, which is it's too bad because we didn't see any VIPs, and it's very, it was very slow for those first 3 hours. So as an exhibitor, you lose 3 really good hours that you don't get back, and you're paying a lot of money to be there. And that was my only complaint personally with show management. Other than that, the show is run really well. Unfortunately, some of the big players didn't come this year. I noticed that, or I heard Packard wasn't there, or Peterbilt wasn't there. Kenworth was. One of the big truck stops was not there, and there was some other big trailer companies that were not there. And the reason being, they don't need to be there. It costs these big companies a fortune to exhibit at the show. I know that our little booth costs a lot of money just for the space and to put people up, put us up in a hotel and travel expenses and everything else. And then you have giveaways you have to, you need to have. So it's expensive. I can imagine how much somebody like, one of the big OEMs like Mack or Navistar or any of them, utility have to spend in order to have a booth, because they have mammoth, just massive booths. And one of the things I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, for the trailer manufacturers, they have to have a service that is covered by the show, put those trailers in there. They're not allowed to put them in themselves. And that's $4,000. Just to have it brought from the parking lot into the building.
Yeah, well, I could definitely see that with the things that are going on now, and everybody, like we talked about on a couple of shows, everybody's trying to get lean and conserve money, and right now, those things are somewhat of a luxury. It is. I've been seeing. I don't know if you got my message I sent to you on Instagram. One guy was out there interviewing different truckers, and they was asking them, how things are, how they're performing out there on the spot market. And I think, it's I hate to see a lot of people that are, I don't want to say complaining or whatever, but I hate to see the struggle that a lot of people are going through, and things are just really getting really tight in the industry right now. And it's going to, unfortunately, I think that it's going to get probably a little bit more tighter before it gets better. But
I think it's going to get a lot tighter before it gets better, because I met people that, I met a guy that had, his company is 4 years old. They have 300 power units, and
wow.
and this is a 4-year-old company. And he said, "Oh, we had explosive growth during COVID, and we hooked up with Amazon, and business we couldn't put enough trucks in, and now Amazon has found a new supplier to replace us, and we're not getting any work." And that is typical, and it's what you and I have talked about on this show 1,000 times. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Okay, we've talked about it. Don't depend on the spot market. It's fickle. And I met somebody else built their business around the spot market. The people that built their businesses around the spot market, or one customer, or low-hanging fruit. There's no more low-hanging fruit. The boys and girls I met, though, that were doing different stuff were killing it still. The people doing partial loads, the people doing hazardous freight. There's there's Tommy. Okay. Welcome back.
Well, I'm back on my phone. My computer's down, so I'm on the phone
okay.
now.
That's what we figured.
Something on that service. I don't know what happened, but I tried to.
So, Tommy, I was about to ask the question to you again on the podcast, because we talked about it briefly, and I heard about this before, and I heard about it again at Matt's, and I want you to shed some light. So if a driver passes away in his truck while he's sleeping, and of natural causes, and they don't get that his or her body out of there within about 36 to 48 hours, my understanding is the truck is basically a write-off.
I would agree.
And, okay.
Depends on the age of the truck, but yeah.
Well, apparently, the one guy had his company had a brand new one that was a write-off because he was in there. Now, I guess it was on a weekend or something. It was. I didn't go into it, but he was pretty upset. Where does insurance come in with this, Tom? Can you tell our listeners?
That's physical damage coverage, and comprehensive would cover that. And most of the physical damage written on the auto policy covers comprehensive. Very few companies would have specified cause of loss. So, and I would think 85-90% of the policies that would be covered under comprehensive, Chuck.
Okay, so they can claim against it. Okay.
Have you hear me? Did you hear me?
Yes, I did. Now, let me ask you a question. What happens when somebody buys one of these new trucks and apparently they're like, well, these big Peterbilts are well over $250,000. You drive them off the lot. There is depreciation. How does that work?
Well, again, this is the roller coaster. Last year, if you remember, we talked about everybody should increase their rates because the value of the trucks went up. Last report, they're going down there. They're lost about 40% of the value they were from a year ago. So they're probably overinsured back to normal times, Chuck. So they would pay what it's worth in real dollars.
Okay.
So that brings up a great topic as well. A person should always every 6 months or whenever they're getting ready to do their renewal, they maybe should jump on truckpaper.com and check the values of their equipment before they're renewed, so that they can make sure that they're getting the adequate amount of coverage.
Rico, yes, I agree with you, but let's talk about it. Absolutely before renewal. Absolutely before renewal. But you read it. I'm an addict a little bit because I read all these press reports, Freightways and JJC, and they tell you when the values go up or down significantly. I'm not worried about 4 or 5%. When they report the truck values have lost another 24% last month, and over the year it's 40%, that tells me I need to go look at it. Or the same way before that, it would show when before that when they went up so high.
Got it.
Okay.
So that's what I would do. Just trade the market. They know what they hear. That's what they're worth. They hear this stuff.
So a lot of our listeners are probably overinsured, are they not?
Today, if they listened to us last year this time, yes.
I think it's probably a good thing to go back, like I say, go back in before your renewal and just kind of see what go on truckpaper.com, put the specs in of the truck, just like you got, like kind, see what's going on the open market right now. That'll give you a great indication on what the value of your equipment is, and then make your adjustments to your insurance accordingly. That way you kind of you keep yourself in a safe zone. You don't want to you don't, hopefully, like say 5 or 10%. You don't want to be too far above, and but you definitely don't want to be 20% below.
Right. Low will put you out of business. But let me make a note here. Not all insurance companies treat towing the same.
Okay.
Everybody's listening to me. You've got to ask your insurance company, if I have a loss and I need all the money to repair my truck, will you pay the towing bill? In other words, will they pay an additional to the limit? The major preferred carriers will. Some of them will pay the towing up to the limit, but no more than the limit, because what we say in the stated amount, all you get is the limit. There are some that you really have to look at that put a towing endorsement on the policy that says we'll pay towing, but that limits coverage, say to $25,000 or $5,000. So they've got to ask all the physical damage carriers, how do you pay towing bills? Do you cap them at the limit, or do you pay above the limit?
Okay. Now, do some have no limit? So if you have, where is towing covered
All right.
on your insurance? Is it on your?
Okay. Yeah. Now you get one of my favorite subjects. Okay. Because I write policies and this kind of stuff. The towing in the provision is back of the policy in 2A that says the motor carrier must protect and preserve the property from further damage and keep a record of that for consideration of payment. It doesn't say we're going to pay. The problem, Chuck, is your personal autos, your commercial autos, the pickup truck that Rocco just had in the insurance act is based, the premium is based on something called state original cost new. So they go in the premium, and I insure my car for my Lexus at $40,000. That's what it costs new. Then they pay the bill, towing bill above that, no problem at all. And that's where the insurance company lost a lot of money. The trucking puts an endorsement on the policies, everybody I'm aware of, that limit to the state amount. What happens is ISO did not change that wording in Protect and Preserve to do that. So we're putting a limitation on something that would be paid when it's done basically like it's most commercial auto is, but trucking is unique on that. So that's the downside. Now, if you wrote your building and your contents, Chuck, the Protect and Preserve is addition to the limit in standard property coverage when there's a limit to put it. So that's the conflict. The form, we put an endorsement on the form that modifies some problem, what the insurer can collect because of that. It's just a quirk in the form itself. So you got to ask how your insured interprets that.
Okay. And that's where you really, that's where you really need an insurance broker that understands it.
Right.
Yes.
Which I was just getting ready to get to, Tommy. Tell it, because I'm looking at the time and we pushed it up. I know we came on about 2 minutes late, but we're pushing up against the top of the hour.
Guys,
how do people get in contact with you, and where can they find more information?
As Chuck and Rico know, it's just email me at Tommy at mcief.org, Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation .org. As like your Rico, I don't know if you know this, your agent has the TRS designation.
Yes.
We know who your agent is, so we know
Yes.
that part of it. And anybody with that has done two things. They sat in front of me for 48 hours and passed the test. So at least they know what a truck is.
Absolutely.
Tommy, every insurance agent that approached me at the show, because everybody's selling something, they don't throw solicitors out at that show. And every one of them, first question I asked them, are you a member of MCIEF? And when they said no, I said, get out of here. I wasn't buying insurance anyway.
I hope you got a lot that said yes to that.
I didn't get very many coming around that said yes, because I don't think the good ones were out there soliciting.
Well, I know you had booths like True North, which was heavily involved in it, and Associate Partners, and some of the Cunningham and Butler. Those people are members of the foundation.
Oh, yeah,
They had booths there, not wandering around.
That's right, exactly. They've got some skin in the game, as they say.
Right, yeah. Guys, we got 4 minutes here. You got any other questions? The other hot subject is double brokerage, as you well know, and the definition of the transparency of brokers. And Chuck, you and I've talked about that part of it. That's the other thing that Hank was hot on today about those things. So the thing that you need for your trucker.
I just finished writing out an affidavit form for that particular group. Because what they're talking about now is they just want to legitimize, and no licenses involve these dispatching services.
Right.
And this is like bringing in a bunch of foxes into the hen house. And I'm not saying every dispatch service is fraudulent. Okay, I'm not saying that at all. But there's certainly enough. We've seen it where
too many fingers in the pie.
Yeah, you've got to have control, because you're talking about people's goods. You're talking about closing down plants. You're talking about supply chain. All sorts of things that go around with it. So, and there's very little support. Rico, we've had our friend Jeff Hall, the security private investigator,
right,
on several times, and his biggest complaint is there's not a hell of a lot of money that's allocated for enforcing the law.
Yeah,
And now,
what they'll tell you, report it, and we'll think if we got time, we'll look at it. I mean, that's the enforcement of the MAP 21 requirements, and so that's a real thing. The bottom line is, anybody to get a load for, they need to go to FMCA's website and see if they have brokerage authority. They have brokerage authority, at least a $75,000 bond there. That if they don't pay, they can make a claim against the bond. Now, I realize, Chuck, you're shaking. I realize that's a tough road, and that doesn't pay all the time, but at least there's some venting there.
you know what though? We had one. There was one that he had a $250,000 bond, I think, and we got taken, and we got our money because we acted right away, thanks to Hank. But you know what? The guys behind us, a lot of people didn't get their money.
Well, what's happening now on the part of the new proposal is if you exhaust, you have to have 75,000 up all the time. So if you make a payment, you have to refurnish that 75,000.
Okay.
So the bonding company, this is the part of the new proposal, which is positive.
Yeah,
It's not enforcement, but this is one of the proposals that are there to make sure you have security, to keep up at least 75,000.
Okay.
And that won't pay everybody, but that should pay, one person, you follow what I'm saying, for until they get caught.
Yeah, that's the problem. When these guys go under, it's quite often for millions.
Well, yeah, they stay in business 6 months, and we can talk a whole subject about stealing freight, and is that identity theft where they come and pick up the load,
Right.
because they got off a load board, and things like that. I got a couple of people, if you're interested in that, I can get them on the program for you.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah, it's pretty scary. It certainly, it's a different world out there today. And I think these times always bring on more frauds.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a real dilemma.
Yeah.
And there's more tools now than ever with all the internets and transparency.
Yeah, and they know how to use it, and they can have phone numbers that are almost identical to that of a legitimate broker and all sorts of stuff. These guys are good. They know what they're doing. Listen.
I got my computer back.
Oh.
Yeah, we got a little feedback.
Yeah,
on you.
Now we don't. I turned my phone off, but we got the computer back. Okay.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, I'm looking. We're getting ready to wrap up, Tommy. I want to take the time to thank you for coming on the show and sharing this information with us. We definitely appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do so. Chuck, anything you want to say before wrapping up?
No, I just want to thank everybody that came by the booth and said hello. It was great seeing you. And if anybody needs any help, please reach out. Just send me an email with your phone number, chucksnow280@outlook.com, and I'll be glad to help you out. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back her in a hole for another week.
Yes, sir. Well, everybody, we appreciate you guys for taking time out to watch the show and to hang out with us for a little while. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us. We're always grateful for you doing so. Please give us some feedback. Let us know on some different topics of subjects that you would like for us to cover, to maybe go out and get some more experts or different people within the industry to come in and help talk about different things that you want to know about. And we don't have all of the answers, and that's why we try to bring people on like our guest Tommy Ruke and Hank Seaton and all the other people that we bring on board. So give us a little homework assignment. Give us some feedback on some of the topics and subjects that you guys would like to know more and hear more about, and we'll do our very best to try to reach out to experts, industry experts, and bring them on so that we can get you accurate and informative information so that you can add more tools to your toolbox. That's the whole purpose of this show. We're here we kind of act as your in pleasure of you, to help you and assist you in getting your operation a little bit better. And in the meantime, in between time, it makes us a little bit better as well.
Exactly. We're really, Rico, when you look at it, you and I are knowledge facilitators.
Absolutely. We try to spread as much as we possibly can.
So with that comment that I've been said, Chuck, is that I know a lot of people talk to me. I don't know much, but I have a good memory and can regurgitate what people tell me.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to, like I say, thank you again. God bless you. Good night. Stay safe out there. Stay healthy. Keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. And God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week.
Thanks,
Catch you
guys.
on the flip flop.
Anytime.
God bless. Thank you.